This is Putting Veterans First, a presentation of the National Veterans Rights Association. NVRA is an organization with one thing in mind, putting the rights and best interest of our veterans first and foremost. This program will provide guidance to the 60,000 homeless vets seeking help, to the millions denied benefits, to the families of more than 17,000 vets annually who commit suicide. Putting Veterans First is hosted by Stu Steinberg, a veteran who served in Vietnam as an explosive ordnance disposal specialist from 1968 to 1970 and a volunteer service officer for Vietnam Veterans of America since 1978. Now, here's Stu Steinberg.
This is Stu Steinberg, and we're going to continue with information about the kind of evidence that you need when you're doing a claim for VA benefits. In my last podcast, we talked about gathering records and other forms of evidence to help support claims for service-connected disability compensation. As I said at the end of that show, it was not meant to cover everything there is to know about recovering records or locating witnesses or how to use witnesses. So I want to go over some other things that relate to these issues. Sometimes you can show that your unit was involved in direct combat or combat support by looking at the awards that your unit received. One source for locating these awards for Army personnel is DA Pamphlet 672-3, Decorations, Awards, and Honors, Unit Citation, and Campaign Participation Credit Register. You can find this document online and download it as a PDF file that will require Adobe Acrobat or Reader to view. Now let's say, like me, you served with the 184th Ordnance Battalion during the Vietnam War. Units are listed in the DA pamphlet first in numerical order, such as the 184th Chemical Platoon, then the 184th Military Intelligence Company, and then Headquarters and Headquarters Company 184th Ordnance Battalion, which the EOD section I was in was assigned to. After the listing for units by number, the listings then go to alphabetical units, such as USARV, U.S. Army Vietnam, and MACV, Military Assistance Command Vietnam. Under the 184th listing, it shows that they received two meritorious unit commendations, one from 1 May 1967 to 30 April 1968, published in DA General Order 31 in 1969, and a second one from May 1, 1968 to April 30, 1969, published in DA General Order 39 in 1970. Now, the manual will not tell you precisely why the unit got the award, so we're back to making a FOIA request to the National Archives. In fact, if you Google the general order, you may even find it on the web. Another possible source is a website called Fold3, that's capital F-O-L-D, the number 3.com. This is an amazing site, but it does cost $79.95 a year if you want access to the millions upon millions of documents these guys have downloaded from the National Archives and other sources. They have now cataloged 438,469,772 records. They have military records of various kinds, orders for unit citations, battle reports, and casualty records, to name a few. For all branches of the military, going back to World War I, they have those records as well. In fact, it is a great historical resource for other military records, including Revolutionary and Civil Wars, the Mexican War, and the War of 1812. When I was doing research for my book, I was able to recover copies of the two meritorious unit commendations from the National Archives, and they showed that the battalion had participated in direct combat support operations, providing ammunition to frontline combat units, including infantry, artillery, armor, and aviation units. This often meant that the battalion's ordnance companies had driven convoys loaded with ammunition to major bases in the 2 Corps Tactical Zone, such as LZs and fire support bases of the 173rd Airborne Brigade, or major base camps like the 4th ID at Ankei and Pleiku. Using the same manual, look for your ordnance company, say the 630th Ordnance Company. If you look up the 630th, you will find that they got the two meritorious unit commendations that were awarded to the battalion. As a matter of fact, when I made my FOIA request for records from the 184th Ordnance Battalion, I asked them for records about the 3 attacks on the Quy Nhon ammunition storage point that was attacked 3 times in February and March 1969 by the VC. This occurred during the post-Tet offensive of 1969. My EOD team was in the dump during the 3 attacks as ammunition was exploding, and for many months afterwards cleaning it up. I ended up getting almost 200 pages of reports about the attacks and many other things that had occurred leading up to and after the attacks. These included contact events with the enemy outside the ASP that had a lot to do with how they eventually were able to get into and out of the dump 3 times without being seen. I was able to use a lot of these records for my own claims and claims for 2 other members of the team. In my own case, I was able to recover the report written by my CO, which described how I was wounded. When I was doing my own claim, prior to the relaxed PTSD standards I mentioned in the last podcast that came into effect in 2010, you needed corroboration of events you said caused your PTSD. You had to do this even if you had, for instance, a Purple Heart. These documents fully supported my claim, and I got the correct rating right away. Another list worth having is the VA's list of Navy ships that are considered brown water ships. This means either that they were patrolling in inland waters or entered inland waters for some other reason, such as transporting a dredge to the harbor in Saigon. The VA keeps this list, and you can find it on their website at http://www.publichealth.va.gov/exposures/Agent Orange/shiplist/index.asp. Sorry that took so long, but it's an important thing to have if you were a brown water sailor. This list is critical if you were on a brown water ship and have contracted an illness presumed to be caused by exposure to herbicides. Because unless you can show that your ship entered inland waters, your claim will be denied. In addition to going upriver, the list will show ships that tied up at docks in the ports such as Da Nang, Chu Lai, Cam Ranh Bay, and Qua Viet. If your ship tied up in one of these harbors, you will still need to show that you left the ship and had, as the VA puts it, boots on the ground. This can be difficult, but there are ways to prove this. Many ships from the Vietnam era have websites that contain lists of crewmen and links to contact them. You may well see the name of someone you served with and be able to get a statement from them that says you did get off the ship, perhaps to get the mail, go to the PX, go to a village for a medical visit with villagers, or for some other reason. Another useful set of records for Navy cases are ships' deck logs. Much like the Army's S3 journals, deck logs keep track of what the ship was doing for each 24-hour period, where it was, and other issues such as noting that a sailor was killed or injured. Here's an example of how important these deck logs can be. One of my clients was a seaman on a minesweeper launch, and we made a claim for PTSD. These were 36-foot wooden vessels that towed the magnetic lines that searched for mines. On a training mission, the MSL was carrying 2 EOD technicians whose job was to disarm or destroy any perceived explosive threats. On this mission, one of the turbine engines exploded, sending a large piece of shrapnel into one of the EOD techs, almost cutting him in half. He eventually succumbed to his injuries. My client was a witness to this event, and it has been something that he has never forgotten. My client was able to get close to the date of this event, and I requested the deck logs for several days before the event and several days after. What I got back fully described what had occurred and that it had occurred on my client's launch. In addition, the deck log noted that there had been a Judge Advocate General line of duty investigation, and I was able to recover that document from the Department of the Navy with a FOIA request. In another case, my client had been involved in one of the worst typhoons to hit the Pacific during the Vietnam War, and to this day, he fears being on any body of open water. I was able to recover the deck logs for the days of the typhoon and was able to put my client on one of the ships that was almost sunk due to massive waves. I mentioned during the last podcast that I would give you some useful tips on looking for certain things contained in your military personnel records that can help you with issues around your claim. In the Army, the 2 documents that are important are your DD-214 and your DA Form 20, now the DA Form 2. These documents contain a lot of useful information that you may need for a claim for service-connected disability compensation. Each branch of service issues a DD-214 and has documents similar to the DA Form 20 and DA Form 2. In the Navy and Marine Corps, there are documents that show your assignments, the dates you were, for instance, aboard a ship or in country in Vietnam or later conflicts. On many older DD-214s, the dates you were in Vietnam can be found in Block 30 titled Remarks. Your DA Form 20 on page 3 contains your Record of Assignments. This will show each unit you were assigned to, the date you got there, and the date you left. Many of us do not remember the exact dates we were in country, so the information on the DA Form 20, now the DA Form 2, can be important for tracking down unit records. Often, the DD-214 is inaccurate in reporting awards and decorations, sometimes even your rank at discharge. This can often be important for certain claims, particularly claims for PTSD or injuries suffered as a result of being wounded. So, look on page 4 and your awards should be noted in block 41. If awards, including marksmanship badges, are not listed, this is one of the reasons I told you in the last show to ask for orders in the other section of the Standard Form 180. Page 2 of DA Form 20 will list your promotions by rank and date. Page 3, in addition to your regular assignments, will also contain the dates and locations of any military schools you attended. This could be important because I have had cases that involved injuries that occurred in basic training or MOS training, and you may not have sought medical care, or you did, but there is no record of this visit in your medical file. For Army vets, if you have the name of your basic or advanced training unit, you may be able to recover morning reports from the National Personnel Records Center, and they may show that you went to a hospital or clinic. Once you get to a regular unit, the S3 journals, which we discussed in the first podcast, should show a hospital or clinic visit. Navy deck logs also often contain this type of information. In fact, if you have a claim based on herbicide exposure and your ship docked in Vietnam, the deck logs may well note who left the ship and what they were doing when they were on land. Now, there's one other thing that I want to say about the morning reports at the National Personnel Records Center. They are kept on microfiche, and I have unfortunately had it happen that when they show up, the copies, they are barely legible, let alone readable. And if this happens, if you get morning reports and they look like that, there's just nothing that can be done about it. Anyway, now, morning reports will also list the names of the people in your unit. It may be that you will see a name you remember, and it might be someone who knows you were injured. There are several good ways to locate potential witnesses like this. First, you can use a skip tracing site like Intellius, INTELLIUS. And if you know the name, and it's not something common like John Smith, you may be able to locate them. Websites like this cost money, but it is really inexpensive just to do a people search. And by the way, after you put the name in, if you got a good estimate of what their age would be, put that in as well. It'll really narrow down the number of hits you get. If you were injured after you got to a regular unit or a ship, you may find that this unit has a listing on military.com. It is free to join. You type in the name of your unit, and if others have signed on, you will see their names, the years they were in the unit, and many have email contact information. I have actually used this site to locate men my client served with in Vietnam and who were able to give me a statement about my client's injury, a particular battle, a convoy that was ambushed, or a ship that went upriver, which, as I've said, is important for Agent Orange-related claims if you were in the Navy or on an Army ship, as a matter of fact. In addition, many Navy ships have websites listing crew members, the years they served, and email contact information. I cannot overstate the importance of witness statements in many types of claims. I'm not just talking about fellow soldier statements, but also statements from family members, friends, and coworkers. These statements can be particularly compelling in PTSD cases and claims involving hearing and orthopedic problems. As an example, whenever I do a PTSD claim, if my client is married, I always get a sworn statement from the wife. I will send the veteran the diagnostic criteria for PTSD and ask that the wife read it and then write her statement based on the symptoms she has noted, describing what she has observed, how serious they are, and how they impact on the veteran's daily, social, and occupational life. And this is really crucial because this is one of the main things that VA raters look at when they're rating someone for PTSD or, in fact, for any mental health disorder. It's how the symptoms impact their daily, social, and occupational life. And the more impact they have, it's more likely the rating is going to be higher. Sometimes I get similar statements from children, siblings, or coworkers. These types of statements are also useful in making a claim for total disability based on unemployability, particularly when you can get one from an employer or a coworker. As an example, I had a claim for tinnitus and hearing loss that the VA denied because they said he had not complained when he was discharged and did not make the claim until more than 40 years after he was discharged, despite the fact that the in-service evidence showed exposure to massive amounts of acoustic trauma and no civilian occupation that ever exposed him to this kind of noise. I got statements from his wife and son showing that he had been complaining about hearing loss and tinnitus as far back as the mid-1970s. They denied the appeal as well, failing to even discuss the late statements that I had submitted. This case is now at the Board of Veterans' Appeals, and based on their prior decisions on an issue exactly like this, I am confident that they will reverse the regional office decision. Well, that's it for today. I'll be out of the country for the next 10 days, cooling my heels in nice warm Mexico. So tune in after February 15th for my next podcast. I will be discussing a recent Institute of Medicine report about VA and DoD treatment of PTSD and traumatic brain injury, and the fact that after many years, neither agency has developed a program to adequately diagnose and treat these conditions. I'm not kidding you. I will also be discussing the recent National Geographic report on TBI titled The Invisible War on the Brain. You can find it online along with the IOM report, which is titled Treatment for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder in Military and Veterans Populations, Final Assessment. See you next time.
You've been listening to Putting Veterans First, a program designed to help millions of vets and their families receive the benefits and care they deserve. Putting Veterans First is a presentation of the NVRA, the National Veterans Rights Association.